All right. Welcome everyone to the 2020 Luzerne County Cares Virtual Expo. My name is Amy Tomkoski. I'm the Deputy Administrator for Luzerne, Wyoming County's Mental Health and Developmental Services Department. Before I hand you over to our presenter, Rachel, I want to review just a few items. Please be aware that this session is being recorded. If you have not already done so, please mute yourself for the session. All questions should be typed into the chat box and will be addressed by the presenter at the appropriate time. Please do not include any case-specific information in your questions. Near the end of the session, I will post a SurveyMonkey link in the chat. This link will give you access to your certificate for the course. And now I'm going to hand it over to Rachel.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rachel Drozg, Assistance Program Mental Health Liaison with Children's Service Center. If any of you are familiar with the Green Cross Academy of Traumatology, I am also a certified compassion fatigue. This presentation is coming at such an interesting time because I'm telling people that I red carded myself on Friday, that I was becoming aware that I was getting involved inappropriately, emotionally, not in unethical ways, although I will talk a little bit about the ethics of emotion in our care, but that I needed to step back and take time for myself, because now that I've been through it a few times, I know what my compassion fatigue warnings are. For those of you who are not familiar, compassion fatigue was a term that was coined by Charles Figley. He was a theorist, and his most basic definition is the cost of caring, which of course was the title for today's presentation. The Green Cross Academy of Traumatology calls compassion fatigue the separation of our clients from ourselves in a distancing, barrier reinforcing way. It's so important when we're in relationships with our clients and their families and their supports, and also the people who work alongside us, our coworkers, our supervisors, that we are maintaining appropriate boundaries. And this means that we're not deeply, deeply involved in their lives, and they're not deeply, deeply involved in ours, where there is a sense of overexerting ourselves, overexerting them, and becoming emotionally engaged too much, but also that we're not developing too much of a sense of detachment, where now we're depersonalizing people, we're building barriers between them and us so that we can find ourselves different from them in fundamental ways, or we see their situations as things that we could never possibly consider ourselves inside of. And so it's really important in our empathic responses, how we respond to people internally inside of our emotional environment and our psychological environment, and externally how we're actually presenting to other people, that we have this sense of satisfaction in the emotional care that we provide, but also a sense of detachment, that we can maintain safe boundaries. So it's important that we keep these in balance with each other. My goal with compassion fatigue prevention is that our very regular contact with pain and trauma and illness and grief, it should not seem normal. It shouldn't seem normal to us, and that's difficult because I think it's very common for practitioners, caretakers to become dulled and at times even deadened to the shock of our jobs, and it should never, ever seem normal to our clients. I recently read a book by Kate Bowler, who was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at the age of 35. And she had a son who I believe was about 2.5 years old at the time of the diagnosis. And she talks about how when she was going in for her treatments, that nurses would talk to her like she was already dead. They would say things like, well, at least your son is old enough, he's going to remember you. And I think about what it must have been like for those nurses to treat person after person after person diagnosed with severe and terminal cases of cancer, and how to them that contact with grief, and illness became so normal that having the thought of, well, I mean, her son is old enough, so he'll remember her, is a normal thought. But then to go beyond that into the phase of you feel comfortable actually saying that sentence out loud to the person. That is a very intense case of compassion fatigue. And so I think that compassion fatigue sort of happens at the point that we begin responding to clients and their caretakers as unmoved or dismissive or overwhelmed by their situation. And I think it's important to recognize, in the vein of compassion, being satisfied with the emotional contact and support that we're giving to people, when we become overwhelmed by their situation, we make it appear as though, and we can make it appear as though, we really don't have the skill set to accomplish what they're asking us to help them with. Whereas when we're unmoved or dismissive, we invalidate the experiences that they're having. When we engage in this kind of emotional processing and engaging with other people, my concern is that we stop building therapeutic rapport and instead can begin damaging the relationship. So I'm going back to Kate Bowler here. What is the appropriate response to someone saying to you when you have stage 4 cancer? Well, at least your son is old enough that he'll remember you. What is the appropriate response to that? Well, there's probably not one, because it was an inappropriate sentence in the first place. But especially, let's say she says, well, that's an awfully rude thing to say. That's a sign that we're destroying therapeutic rapport. So I want to kind of situate what are the pathways to compassion fatigue. And I broke it down. This is not an official system, but I broke it down kind of into some different phases. So I want you to think of this sort of as a diagnostic for yourself, and consider it as, yes, I see myself in some areas here. When I click on the first one, the first thing you're going to read might surprise you, especially if you're newer to the field. Those of you who have been around a long time, you may look at this and you'll say, oh yeah, I know people like this. So compassion fatigue very, very frequently starts with extremely high motivation at the beginning, which I'm calling the save the world complex. So saying things like, this work makes me who I am. Other people say I'm setting unrealistically high expectations, but I think they're being pessimistic. I know that I am going to be different. I'm going to be the exception to the rule. I have big dreams and nothing is going to get in my way, and I can't see your faces or hear you laugh. But if you've been involved with bureaucracy for more than 4 hours, you know that a lot of things are going to get in your way, and a lot of them start with a P word called paperwork. The more people I help, the better I'm going to feel, and the more I can heal my own trauma. That is a very concerning sentence. And I think it's a sentence that we may not hear out loud stated so much. I got into this work to heal my own trauma, but I actually just read a study over the weekend about child welfare workers, that over 80% of the child welfare workers in this study had at least one adverse childhood experience, and 40% had adverse childhood experiences of 4 or more, which is almost 4 times the national rate. And some of the people who had high adverse child experiences scores said the reason that I got into child welfare was because of the traumas that I experienced as a child. I am not saying, and I want to be clear on this, I am not saying that people who have trauma in their background should not get into this work. That's not at all it. What I am saying is that when we start believing that our healing hinges on somebody else's healing, that the better healing we provide for other people, the better healing we can achieve for ourselves, we're walking some dangerous grounds here. Not the least reason being because we're giving our power to heal ourselves to somebody else. We're having it hinge on somebody else's progress, which that is very much a leftover from abuse, that I don't have power over my life. Other people have power over my life and my decisions. And so when we do things like I'm going to heal myself through my work, and by providing support to other people, we're reenacting our past traumas. So that's phase one, the save the world complex. Phase two, physical, emotional, and psychological overexertion. So this may sound like I don't want to talk to my boss about my caseload, but I do want to talk to my boss about my caseload, but I don't want them to be disappointed in me or feel like I'm not capable or good at my job. The phrase, my clients need me, I can't sleep. I lay awake thinking about what my clients have and are experiencing. I always eat lunch at my desk. I worry about what will happen if I walk away. Talk about being on a power trip with that sentence. I'm doing less of the things that brought me peace and joy before, like exercising, socializing, reading, etc. And I always take my work home with me. So whether that is physically, I'm bringing my notes home, I'm doing them at the kitchen table, I'm doing paperwork sitting in my bed right before I fall asleep, or emotionally, I walk through the door and I'm just a terror every single day about the things that I have seen, the things that I've heard from other people. Phase three, the inundation of demands. So bureaucratic, emotional, whatever, and then either numbing, so depersonalizing other people, or sympathizing, so really tying our emotions up a lot more than a healthy amount with other people. So this may come off with, and again, I can't see your faces and hear your laughs, but I imagine some people have said this sentence. I know I've heard it. I probably have said it myself. Between all the calls to the insurance company, scheduling my clients, and writing my progress notes, I don't know how anyone expects me to actually be a good support to my client. I want to take a break, but I feel like the world will fall apart if I do. If I'm not there to rescue everybody, if I'm not there to jump in and fix this and comment on that, bad things will happen. I feel I physically and emotionally cannot continue listening and providing support to my most troubling clients. I think I hate my job, but when I think about leaving, I feel like that would mean leaving a part of myself behind. And I feel guilty when I engage in self-care or feel hopeful, peaceful, or joyful. There is something called survivor's guilt. And this is not directly related to compassion fatigue, but I think there are some components that tie in here. That in survivor's guilt, let's say there is a mass event, whether that be a natural disaster, a human-made disaster, and some people pass, and other people are severely injured, and other people are mildly injured. And then some people are not physically injured at all. One of the phenomena that happens in situations like that is people have this feeling of, how do I go on living my life knowing that that person lost their leg and this person died? How do I do something happy, like get married, celebrate my child's birthday with vigor? How do I go and do these things knowing that there's so much sadness out there? But I think that compassion fatigue has a tie-in with that too, because when we hear about the traumas, when we witness the horrible, horrible things that can happen in the lives of other people, and even in our own lives, it feels like it's inappropriate to find peace. It's inappropriate to really grab onto joy and hold onto that, to wrestle with holding onto joy while we live in a broken world. And the last one is full-blown compassion fatigue. Phrases like, I hate my clients. I love my clients so much, I can physically feel their pain, and I feel like their lives are entwined with mine. Now, that's not to say that if you're a highly empathetic and empathic person that you really can feel pain. It's, I feel their pain long after they're gone. I think about it. I ruminate on it. I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm still in that place that I was in that therapy session or that child abuse investigation, that it's almost like I'm still physically in that moment. When my family and friends need my support, I tell them or fantasize about telling them to stop complaining about stupid, insignificant things. Now, I've been guilty of this. I'm going to cop to that one right up front there. That should be a big trigger when not a big trigger, a big warning sign. that when the people who we would say are most important to us, the people who we would say are our priorities, that we have to stop hearing from them, that should be a big, big warning sign. I feel exhausted all the time. I'm in pain constantly for no apparent reason. If you're having physiological distress, if your body is trying to send you signals by waking you up really often, giving you nightmares, you're in pain, but you don't really know why. You haven't fallen, you haven't had some sort of accident, but you just seem like everything hurts really a lot of the time. It could very well be compassion fatigue. And this is a big one. I'm taking unscheduled days off and sick days pretty often. One of the antecedents, so one of the things that comes before someone leaving their job from burnout, is they're calling off more and more and more often. It's healthy to take sick days. It's extremely important to take your personal time. But when they become closer together, when they're coming unannounced more often, and I don't mean like, oh man, I woke up with a stomach flu and really you do not want me at work today. I mean, I just feel like I can't go and face the world today. Those ones, be careful of those, because very often an increase in call-offs and sick days leads to you leaving your job. So the next one, I'm going to warn you, I'm very direct. So this is not my quote. This is from Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, and she tells this hilarious story of on her end, it's a fight with her husband, and on her husband's end, it's just, what is going on here? That at the end of it, she realizes she has been spewing her anxiety, her stress, her concerns onto her husband. She's been projecting them onto him, and he's feeling this and he's feeling that and he's making this happen. And at the end, it turns out none of the things that she's assumed are going on with him are actually true. And he kind of says to her, Brene, I know that you're worried about this, and I know that you're really concerned about that. And I hear that, which is a wonderful thing to have a spouse who can say those words to you, instead of saying, this is not about me, this is a you problem, even when that is the case. But her conclusion is that very often in our lives, we make ourselves the center of something that has nothing to do with us out of our own fear or scarcity, only to be reminded that we are not the axis on which the world turns. I think ouch about that at first, because it's so direct. It is so in your face to be told you are not the center of the universe. You are not the axis on which the world turns. And we're kind of familiar with that sentence. But the part about we do this, we try to make ourselves the center of things out of our own fear and scarcity, is so profound that if we go back to the other slides, when we go through these, I want to take a break, but I feel like the world will fall apart. I feel exhausted all the time. In the context of those kinds of sentences, fear and scarcity certainly do sound like what winds us up, over-functioning or under-functioning for our clients, and not being engaged enough with ourselves, not being engaged enough with our self-care, not being engaged enough with our supports. The really great news is that if you got to stage 4 slide and you thought, oh my gosh, this is me, I am so deep in it, what do I even do? Do I have to leave my job? Does this mean I'm bad at my job? No, it is not that at all. Compassion fatigue does not mean that you've done something wrong. Okay, I'm going to qualify that. Compassion fatigue does not mean that you're bad at your job. Compassion fatigue does not mean that you are a bad person. And it doesn't mean that you have to make huge career changes. It doesn't mean that, you've really stepped in it and now it's all hopeless. That's so not what compassion fatigue is. There is there are definitely routes to recover without leaving your job. If you're really great at your post and you're really passionate about it and you want to be good at it and you want to be there for it. This is my philosophy on all recovery. I tell my clients this. I believe it for myself. Recovery is not a straight line or an easy path, but you are worth the effort. Recovery is not a straight line or an easy path, but you are worth the effort. And in the vein of compassion fatigue and caretaking for others, your clients are worth you being healthy. When I got into the field and I heard people say the whole airplane thing, you know, if an airplane's going down, you put the mask on yourself first and then you put it on your child. The first couple times I heard it, I thought, this is bonkers. This is just the wildest thing I've ever heard. And now that I've experienced intense compassion fatigue myself, and I was to be like just owning myself, I was on the over empathizing into sympathizing range of compassion fatigue. Now that I've been around for a while and I've lived through it and I made changes in my life and I've gotten back to myself, I'm such a better clinician taking care of my clients, helping support my clients, because I'm coming in at or near 100%. If you're taking your, you know, like we check our cell phones for what the power level is. If you're taking your compassion fatigue or compassion satisfaction temperature and you're like, I'm at 20%, I'm at 50%, I'm at stage 1, I'm at stage 3, I'm at stage 4. Okay, good on you to own that. Now, what do we do with that? So there's 3 different ways to look at this. Starting with your compassion fatigue habits. How do you know when you're getting too distant or too close to your clients and their situations? So there's moving away, moving toward, and moving against. Examples of moving away are putting these barriers between yourself and other people in not super aggressive ways. So maybe you use sarcasm to keep people at a distance. Maybe you isolate yourself. When people say, how are you? You say things like, oh, I'm fine. It's never been better. Avoiding people, situations, and places that feel stressful. So that's moving away. Moving toward, which is what I do, trying to work harder and get closer to the things that are upsetting in a bigger effort to overcome them. So I'm going to, you know, I'm going to take out my times 1,000 microscope and I'm going to really zone in on this problem. And maybe if I can look closer and closer and closer and closer, I'll find the thing that I've been missing, or the whole treatment team has been missing, or this client's whole support system has been missing. So that's moving toward. Moving against is using condescension, criticizing, picking fights with everything and everyone that might ask for or benefit from your support. So moving against is, instead of moving away from the tension or moving towards attention, moving against is driving directly into it. It's kind of like having an emotional bulldozer that, you know what, if you're in my way, I'm going to have to take you out. And here's all the ways that I'm going to do it. So moving against is trying to push back on the thing. If any of you are trauma people, we've talked about, you know, in the trauma world, the body keeps the score. I love this quote from Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Being validated by feeling seen and heard is a precondition for feeling safe, which is critical for exploring trauma and abandonment. So the note down there, he's not talking about compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue is not a trauma. Compassion fatigue is not abandonment. It can occur and increase because of our own trauma and our own abandonment. It can occur because of other people's trauma and abandonment that we're in constant contact with as supports. But I do think it's important to say that when we allow our compassion fatigue to fester, when we allow our moving away or moving toward or moving against to just take over our lives, we limit how much relief and recovery we can experience, because we're going to use this sentence, and I want to clarify that, again, this is not a trauma, but we're becoming victims of our own cycle. With neuroplasticity, we know that the more times we take a certain path, the more times we make a certain decision, the more likely we are to do that thing again. One of the things that I do in the morning is I put my dogs in their crates. So I walk them, I feed them, I put them in their crates, I lock the kitchen door, and I go out to my car. And most mornings, I get about 15 miles from my house, just far enough that it would be unreasonable to turn back before I go, did I put the dogs in my crates? Now, this is specific because my dogs, one of them likes to destroy things if she's left out on her own. She just, hey, everything's a toy now. But neuroplasticity is so powerful for me to walk the dogs, feed the dogs, put them in their crates, lock the door behind me, and leave, that my brain cannot recall the moment that I actually locked the dogs in their crates. That's neuroplasticity. And the same thing happens with compassion fatigue, with our moving away, moving toward, moving against. That the more times I move against something, the more times I move against something. The more times I use sarcasm to respond to things that I don't really feel like discussing, the more times I'm going to use sarcasm to respond to things that I don't feel like discussing. So being validated by feeling seen and heard is a precondition for feeling safe, which is critical for exploring trauma and abandonment. So where do we go from here? First and foremost, you need to redefine your position. One of the things that the Green Cross Academy of Traumatology is very specific about is that all caretakers, all practitioners, we need to see ourselves as the conduit and the tool, not the healer. We are not the ones doing the work. That is a very hard sentence for people to hear, I think, because we want to be able to feel that what we're doing for people is really powerful. And it is, but not in a dangerous kind of way. It is not your responsibility, nor is it helpful for you and the people that you care for to try to force them to take what you're offering. I think about a clinical skill set, an interpersonal skill set, and what we work with our clients on. I think about it as a toolbox. So you come into my office and I show you a hammer, and I show you how to use a hammer, and I put the toolbox on the floor next to you, and you say, thank you, that was really helpful. And then you get up and you leave, and the toolbox is on the floor there. Okay, fair. We're not ready to use the hammer outside of the office right now. Cool, that is fine. You come back 3, 4, 5 more times. Now we've introduced screwdrivers and saws, and we've got a lot of different things. But the toolbox stays on the floor. And so it's there when you come, and it's there when you leave, but it doesn't go with you. And then one day you walk in my office and you go, oh my gosh, that hammer thing. I need to bring the hammer home with me. Great. That is how we should be thinking of our skill sets. If you are only prepared to use it in my office right now, that's fine. We're going to keep rehearsing it here. And I hope that at some point, our clients each say, oh my gosh, that thing that we talked about, I need to go over it again. Or can you remind me how that works? Or can we rehearse that? Because that means that we're giving them a skill set, not that we're forcing it down their throats. And again, going back to trauma is a power differential. If we're trying to force our clients to use the skills that we're offering to them, we're exerting power over them, which reinforces trauma, because it tells them you are not capable of doing this yourself. You do need me to do this for you. And for what it's worth, if people don't recognize the positives that you have to offer, that is not a you problem. This is speaking specifically towards those of us who have the moving toward factor in our lives. When someone comes into your office and they watch you use the hammer and they listen to all your lessons and they go, that is so stupid. Why would you think I'm going to use that? That does not mean that there's something categorically wrong with what you've done or who you are or the approach that you've taken. Now, I said before, I'm pretty direct, but On the bottom here, give your clients back the right to be experts on their lives so that you can regain your expertise over your own life. That is the direct sentence. But there's not an easier way to say that. If we are each trying to be experts on our clients' lives, we're going to lose grasp of our own. And we're going to take away their right to be experts on their own lives. One of the things that I think is all too common, and I'm going to speak specifically in mental health, but one of the things that I think is all too common in mental health is practitioners become experts on clients' lives where they walk in and we say right away, oh my gosh, I've only spent 5 minutes with this person. I can totally tell that they're, XYZ disorder and that this won't work and that won't work for them. And we start making assumptions about what traumas they may or may not have experienced. That is a not favorite conversation to witness. Well, they must have been through this. I just can tell, I know this about them. And so we work them and we grind them to try to find out this thing that we really believe about them. I even have a client who disclosed a past sexual assault and her practitioner laughed at her and said, stop making things up. Wow. When you can become such an expert on other people's lives that you feel comfortable laughing at a disclosure, we're out of balance and we're in danger and we're endangering our clients. The second key is reorienting your self-care. Some of you know that I always say that Sir Isaac Newton is one of the greatest psychologists I've ever heard of, which is funny because Sir Isaac Newton was not a psychologist, but one of his laws of physics is an action in motion will remain in motion unless obstructed by an outside force. And one of his other laws of physics is every action has an equal opposite reaction. Well, what happens if we replace the term action with emotion? Then Sir Isaac Newton is a fantastic psychologist. An emotion in motion will remain in motion unless obstructed by an outside force, like self-care. Or every emotion has an equal and opposite emotion. Okay, so what do we do with this? We're going back to balance here. The care that we provide to others is proportionate to the care that you provide to yourself. So we've all heard the term probably by now. You can't pour from an empty well and you can't drink from an empty cup. If your cup is empty for yourself, it's empty for your clients too. You may be trying to tell yourself that that's not the truth, but if you are empty for your own self-care, you're coming off as empty for your clients too. And it's important to recognize our clients can spot that from a mile away. And so many of them have been in so many different systems for so long that they're not going to bother telling you that because they've seen it so many times before. Most of our caretakers' codes of ethics, social workers, therapists, they have an ethical standard telling us you must take care of yourself. Our own ethical standards are saying ethical care is self-care and self-care is ethical care. And if you are not applying self-care, you are not providing ethical training. You are not providing ethical care for your clients. Self-care is restorative. This is such a huge thing. Self-care should provide a lasting sense of relief or joy, energy, rest, etc. Anything that makes you feel worse, substance use, fighting, overeating, gossiping, binging on shows and movies, complaining without problem solving, that's not self-care. If the second you move away from that, you still feel really emotionally bad, that wasn't self-care. That doesn't mean that sometimes venting isn't appropriate. That doesn't mean that sometimes watching a movie is not appropriate. It just means that that cannot be the only type of self-care that you engage in. And it's important to note too that self-care may not always provide you with energy. I tend to be a very fast-moving, high-strung, very energetic individual. So it's difficult for me to find rest. something that's really important for me is to get enough exercise that my body will literally wind itself down afterwards to encourage bodily recovery patterns. That helps my emotions get back to a balance so that I can properly rest my physical and my emotional self. Self-care plans change and grow and evolve with our lives. So it's possible that what worked a year ago for you might not work right now, and something that didn't used to help might suddenly start helping. I also think of self-care as a balance. So if you've ever heard yourself or one of your coworkers say the phrase, "I have too much going on right now, I can't possibly take a break," that is the exact moment that you need to be saying to yourself, okay, that was a warning sign. Now I know I need to take a break. Because the more we're out of balance with our emotions, the more we're out of balance with our thoughts, the more likely we are to make mistakes. There's actually a lot of scientific support to say that people who are stressed get in accidents. We do things like trip and fall up the stairs or down the stairs. If you're a normal person, I'm an up the stairs kind of person. We say things we don't mean, or things that we do mean, but weren't very tactful. We file the wrong paperwork. We send a fax to the wrong person, and now all of a sudden there's HIPAA floating around the wild ether. We do things like that. So bring your self-care back into balance, going back to every emotion remains in motion unless obstructed by an outside force, and every emotion has an equal and opposite emotion. Bring your self-care into balance. And if you know that your caseload is going to be extra heavy this week, if you know that you're going to be in a lot of extra things going on over the next couple months, know that that is the time to increase your self-care practice to match that stress, not to decrease it. So examples of everyday in the moment self-care. Working at Children's Service Center, the direct care staff are safe crisis management trained. And so we each have on the back of our badges, self-care plans. What do we do? I'm sorry, safety plans. What do we do if you are in a crisis and you're starting to get out of balance? So let's say, for example, you have a client who's become physically aggressive, a danger to self and others, and you have no choice but to put them in an emergency safety protective intervention. So you put them in a hold. Well, you're not going to be able to take a break there. But what else can you do? Telling yourself inside of your head, you're doing the best that you can. Are you doing this safely? Where are you right now? Check in with yourself. Afterwards, maybe allowing yourself to feel, maybe allowing yourself not to feel too much. Remembering to breathe. I am a professional forget to breathe person. And if you can see on your little screen of me, the more stressed I get, the more my shoulders approach my ears. So one of my self-care things is to remind myself, like, okay, put your shoulders back in your shoulder sockets and just use your lungs. Forgiving yourself and forgiving other people. Recognizing that mistakes do not require forgiveness because they are just very simply mistakes. This is a tricky one because those of us who work in direct care, I think a lot of us are so prone to making mistakes that cause a problem, and now we're angry at ourselves for making the mistake that caused a problem. Guys, an honest mistake is just an honest mistake. You don't have to forgive yourself for that. Coming back to things at a different time. Listen, this is really important, but I'm a little bit too in it, so I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to come back to this a later time. And then setting and stating and maintaining clear boundaries. It's also important to restructure relationships. So find somebody who can be a compassion fatigue buddy and ask if they're willing to help you heal and prevent future compassion fatigue. So they can be involved and you will listen to them when they say, I'm concerned about some of the things that you're doing right now. How is your self-care? If you're not willing to listen to them, don't go to that person. Or if you're not willing to listen to anybody, then find someone who is going to be a little bit clearer and a little bit more direct to say, listen, you're not okay right now. You need to do something about that. And I know you're not planning on listening to me, so we're going to do this together. Share with that person what your warning signs are, what your triggers are, and what your self-care plan actually is. My boss is fantastic about exercising. And before COVID happened, she was always really specific about making sure that unless there was an absolute like emergency level crisis, that she left at a decent time to make it to her gym class. Well, that made it free for me to leave at an appropriate time to get to my gym. If my boss can do that, so can I. So have someone who's willing to keep you honest in that area and say, you're a little funny this week. Have you been to the gym? No, I've been really stressed out. Oh, okay. I hear what that conversation was. Talk with your supervisors. A greater concern for your supervisors is losing you as a staff than having you come to them and say, this is really hard for me. I think we might need to restructure some things. Here are some things that I've come up with. I don't know if they'll work. Can we talk through what this might look like? Work together to find solutions and build a plan. They don't want to have to interview other people. They don't want to have to hire and train other people, because we're talking about you who is proficient and skilled at your job versus a brand new person who knows almost nothing about the thing that they're going to be taking on. And be clear about your boundaries with your clients. If you are someone that you give out your cell phone number, make sure that you tell your clients, I am not going to respond to your calls after 5 p.m. I will not answer the phone on the weekend. You need to call helpline or the emergency number. I am able to see you once every 2 weeks, or I'm able to see you once a week. Be clear and then stick to those unless there's a major emergency that requires a contingency. That way your clients also know that they have safety to set boundaries for themselves. And recognizing and rewarding changes. If you're in stage 4 compassion fatigue, it didn't just start yesterday. It probably started a long time ago, and it's not going to be a straight line, an easy path to get back out of there. It might take a while to get out. That is not a bad sign. That does not mean that you're doing anything wrong. Be fair with yourself. Don't expect miracles, but identify when things are going better. When I decided to red card myself, that was honestly, that was an accomplishment for me to say, you know what, Rach, you need a moment here. You need a moment to step back and take some time. Because previously I would have drilled in on that 1,000 times microscope and said, I need to look at this problem closer. I know if I look at closer, I can certainly understand. And finally, expecting and accepting relapse. Going back to recovery isn't a straight line or an easy path. You're going to break boundaries. Other people are going to break boundaries. And there's definitely going to be some uncomfortable feelings. And that's okay. It is normal for us, because of neuroplasticity, because of habits, it is normal for us to, whoops, I tried to go left and I went right again. It is normal for us to, geez, I meant to go to the gym 4 times this week and instead I only went 1. But okay, I'm going to get back on it this week and I'm going to make sure someone keeps me accountable for that. Relapse is not failure. Relapse is something that exists inside of a lot of theoretical structures about how change of habit happens. But it is also an opportunity to say, how did we wind up here? What do I need to do to stop this slide and to prevent it from happening again? And then work with your buddy to figure out how you can work together on preventing it. Do we need to revisit the self-care plan? Do we need to revisit the things that we've talked about with our buddies? Have we not been honest with ourselves? Have we not been honest with our supervisors? Have we not been honest with our buddy about what's going on? So to close, this is not my quote. A buddy of mine is a retired state trooper, and unfortunately, one of his specialties was investigating crimes against children, including violent child death. And I asked him, when my job really started to get to me, how did you do it? And so this is his wisdom. He said, you do not have to save the whole world. You just have to save enough of yourself to save a little bit of somebody else. There are so many of you just on this call, let alone out there in the field, working let alone all of the other people in all of the other sessions who decided to show up to do something powerful today, to learn about the practice or the field, or to try to change something for their clients. Each of us together can accomplish such great things that we don't have to think of it as saving the world. We just have to think of it as, have I taken good enough care of myself to provide something, to hold out that toolbox to other people? So I just want to thank you all for listening. I want to honor each of you and just say, you're doing it, you know? You showed up and you're doing it. And that in and of itself is a powerful, powerful thing. I'm going to open us up for questions. But I really appreciate you guys showing up and listening. So please take care of yourself. So if anybody has questions and they want to put them in the chat box here, we'll stay on for a couple more minutes to answer. Or if you're done, I thank you. If you're not able to see your chat box, it should have an option on the, like if you hover over the little screen, there's a little, it looks like a little text button.
Rachel, I have a question.
Sure.
To first identify the fatigue, does that need to be self-identification, or as a supervisor, would it work to go to the person and say, I think that you're having issues? Because I feel like, you know, somebody with issues with drug or alcohol, like they have to be the one to come to that conclusion. You know what I mean?
I do. I think it depends on the nature of the relationship that you have with someone, and I think it depends how you approach it. I think that there are definitely people that, especially, I'm going to go ahead and say, especially the moving against people, that if you go to them and you say, hey, you know, bud, I'm really concerned about this, that they may very well be like, you know, but I do think it's of ethical importance to tell someone, I'm concerned that this is impacting your practice with your clients. If you are noticing somebody on your staff or a coworker who has begun, you know, saying, oh, I was talking with my client at 2 o'clock this morning when they were not on call, that's an appropriate time to say, I'm worried we're out of line here. So if it's becoming a practice issue, I think it needs to be said.
Okay.
But I also think if you have the type of relationship that enables you to have that conversation with someone, I think sometimes we don't know when we've slipped from phase 1 to phase 4. That to step back and say, you know, kind of gently ask the questions, how are you taking care of yourself? Oh, I'm not taking care of myself. That's how I'm taking care of myself. And lead them into it. I think that if you have that kind of relationship, that is a powerful way to help someone recognize, oh, I'm out of balance right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'm seeing a lot of praise, but I'm not seeing any questions.
Thank you, guys. You're welcome. You're welcome. I appreciate the support. These are, oh yeah.
Let's see. Yep. Does anybody else have any questions for Rachel?
I do. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm trying to locate the chat box and I don't have the thing to get the chat box up.
Well, you
all
could
I
just,
have,
you could
all
just,
I have is the share button.
You could just ask your question.
Oh, I was just wondering because like I can't get into the chat box, so I can't do the survey.
Oh, for the survey. You know
Yeah.
what? Just send an email to everybody who I sent the invitation to, because some people are having, we've heard with other sessions, problems with the chat box. So I'll also send the survey link in an email to everyone.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. When we get off. Oh, we have a question.
Someone asked, what is the helpful way to gauge when our self-care is not effective? That's a great question. At the risk, okay, I'm a slow learner for what that's about to say. I'm a slow learner and I'm really stubborn, which is why I'm a slow learner. Where it comes to taking care of myself. So for me, an identifier for me is if I'm even bothering to ask, is this effective? That's a sign for me that it's not. If I'm bothering to even kind of check in and go, is this really working as well as I was hoping it would? And I'm working at that, and I'm trying to get better at that. I'd like a little more clarification, Jared, if you could. If you're talking about an entire self-care practice or like individual practices.
I think the way you explained it is very helpful for me, because like if there is the question of is this effective or not, then
Okay.
I think that pretty much sums it up. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Sure. Like I know for me, there are certain places, certain things that I know before I even get there that I'm going to feel better. That is the stuff I try to hit very frequently. You know, people that I try to see or stay in touch with more often, and the things that I'm like, well, how am I going to feel after that? And then there are other things, honestly, that may take a little bit more getting used to as being helpful. So I would also say with that, trying things, giving things, unless you have a visceral, terrible reaction to something, giving things more than 1 or 2 attempts. So for example, if it feels, you know, like it's really appropriate to try to talk to a therapist in your first couple sessions, or like, I don't know if this is for me, don't give up after 1. We tell our clients that too, but give yourself a little bit time to get comfortable with it. If you've never been much of a meditation person and the first couple of times you're like, geez, I can't quiet my brain down, I'm sure I'm not doing this right. Give yourself a little bit of time to get used to it, but don't drag it out to like, now it's been 3 months of me doing this every day and I'm still questioning whether it's effective. That was a question that answered itself. Okay, so you guys have just a couple minutes before your next session. I really appreciate you all. Just reward yourselves. This is a very challenging field, and there are no imminent signs it's going to become less challenging. So be graceful with yourself. Be graceful with your clients. Give your clients the right to be experts on their lives so that you can be an expert on your own life, on your own self-care. And then when you hit the hiccups, when you hit the speed bumps, okay, just go ahead and roll with them. Take care, everybody.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.